Hey, it's Mark Ferguson with InvestFourMore, and we're doing a Halloween special today, my top 10 worst tenants. So we'll go through some crazy situations we've had on properties that I rented tenants to and tenants we've inherited on flips or rentals. So this should be kind of fun. Now, I am outside the strip mall, my office right here, and these are good tenants. We've had some really awesome tenants, so I don't want people to think that every tenant in real estate is bad, because obviously Blue Steel Real Estate is an amazing tenant. That's my office. But the dance studio here has been amazing. The restaurant's amazing. The grocery store over there, the coffee shop have all been great. And a lot of our residential tenants have been great as well. But we have had some bad situations. And a lot of times you'll find the bad situations get the most attention and most press, but they take away from the really good tenants. So we'll still show you all the bad stuff, but just want to make sure people know real estate isn't crazy and horrible all the time. Just some of the time. All right. Of course, check out investfourmore.com for much more information on our flips, rentals, being an agent, all that great stuff. And we have 9 books on Amazon, and we love it when you like or comment on our videos. So if you want to do that, feel free. We won't stop you. And let's get started looking at some of these crazy situations.
So we're starting off with this beautiful gem. This is a house flip I bought with the tenants in place, so I knew there were tenants there. They're Section 8 tenants. Just because I say they're Section 8 doesn't mean they're bad. There's some great Section 8 tenants. There's some bad Section 8 tenants, just like all properties. But Section 8 basically means they get government assistance. So what happened with this house was I bought it. The tenants had a lease going for a couple more months. Their lease expired, and we tried calling them, checking with them, seeing if they're going to move out. They never responded to us, just did not respond. And then we had a crazy high water bill. So we kept driving by the property, trying to figure out, what's going on with this property. Are they here? Are they not here? They had lots of vehicles, lots of stuff there, but no sign of anyone living there. So we decided to go into the property. They wouldn't respond to us. We have the right to protect our property. So we had our locksmith open it up, and we went inside the property, and it was flooded. So I had seen this house before. The floors were hardwood floors. They're in decent shape. The house wasn't in horrible shape. And what the tenants did is they moved out, didn't tell us they moved out, turned off the heat, and opened up all the windows in the middle of February. Now, did they do that on purpose? I can't say for sure they did, but turning off the heat and opening up all the windows was not something that most people, I think, would do. You could say it's an accident that they turned off the heat, but it ended up ruining all the floors, freezing the pipes. You can see water there. All those cabinets had to be torn out and redone. We had to replace subfloor. So what turned into what should have been a $20,000, $25,000 rehab at the most, turned into like a $40,000 rehab thanks to that disaster. So, yeah, those tenants did not treat this house very well or help us out very much. And they had not moved out all the way. They'd left all their vehicles there. You can see those are their vehicles. So they moved out of the house, but then later came back to get their vehicles and some other stuff too. This is a commercial property that I bought. It had commercial in front, residential in back. This is the back residential unit, and then a basement below it that we're planning to finish at some point. So I recently bought this about a year ago, maybe a little longer than that, and we rented it to a real estate broker. So, of course, all real estate brokers are awesome and pay their rent and all of that good stuff, right? Well, not this real estate broker. What ended up happening was I was dumb. I did not check his credit. I don't know why. I just assumed, hey, he's a real estate broker. He's got to be a good guy and pay his rent and everything. Well, he moved in. He paid a deposit and like a prorated amount for 1 month's rent. He seemed like a cool guy. We talked to each other. He came by my office, talked about real estate, talked about working together on different deals and stuff. He focused primarily on commercial real estate. And what happened was month 2 came along, and he didn't pay. And so we're like, okay, what's going on? Talk to him. He's like, oh, my bank got messed up. I'll get you paid here right away. So a week passed, still didn't pay anything. Talked to him again. Oh, don't worry. My bank's figuring it out. We'll get it back in place. Promise to pay. A couple more weeks passed, and again, we're coming up onto the second month or third month of his tenancy, and he didn't pay again. He's behind 2 months' rent, and he had excuse after excuse after excuse. He ended up claiming that his bank account had been hacked. And so even though we set up the rental payment to come to us, because his bank was hacked, never got sent. You can see his cigarettes there. It smelled a tiny bit of smoke in the apartment, but not a ton. So at least there's that. And so he said, "Oh, my bank account got hacked. It's okay. I'll get you paid here soon. I've got a closing coming up." And so I'm thinking, great. If you have to wait for a closing to pay rent, you've probably got some money issues, some money problems. We waited a week or two, still nothing. And he called me. He didn't really call me. I would have to call him every time and say, "Hey, what's going on?" He never, was proactive about any of it. He said, "Oh, yeah, our closings got delayed. Don't worry, another 2 weeks." So at this point, I've been way too lenient, way too nice already. So I said, "Hey, either you pay us the full amount right now or we're evicting you. You've got to go." And he said, "Okay, no problem. Just give me 2 weeks and I'll pay." I'm like, "No, right now, come to the office, pay it, or we're starting the eviction." He claimed he'd come and do it. Never came, never paid anything. So we started the eviction and posted the notice. And he messaged me and said, "Hey, I can't believe you're doing this. Like, I thought we were cool. How can you kick me out?" I'm like, "You haven't paid rent for 3 months now." And he's like, "Oh, I just had some tough times. It's okay. I'll catch up." And he's like, "How about I'll come in and pay all the rent right now and you cancel the eviction?" And I'm like, "You can come in and pay all the rent right now. We're still evicting you. Whether you're evicted or not, you still owe the money, right? You were living there for 3 months. It's not like you get to leave for free or choose to pay the money and stay." So he did end up leaving. We didn't have to do the full eviction. So luckily we didn't have to have the court out there do anything. But he never paid a dime, never responded to me again. And we did ask our lawyer to file a judgment against him to try and go after that money. And I have not heard yet on the status of that. We need to check back with him. But just this tenant, you cannot go off your gut or what they do or what they say. You have to do background checks. You have to do credit checks. You have to check out references and work history, or else you'll get yourself into situations like this. A lot of people are really, really good talkers, but they aren't very good at actually doing what they say. This is another house that had some tenants that we put in this time. So I had one of the agents on my team managing my rentals for a while. They found these tenants, and really these tenants weren't the worst in the world. They paid their rent on time every single month for years, and they never asked for much to be done. I think we might have replaced the furnace once, but it was how they left the house and how they lived that caused the problem. So they wanted to keep paying us. They paid rent, like I said, every month on time for years, probably 3 years. They wanted to keep renting from us, but every time we had our guys come in to check the property, do furnace filters or smoke alarms or things, were like, it's getting worse and worse. Like, the house is not being taken care of well, and it's just going to go downhill from there. So at one point, we're just like, yeah, we're not gonna renew your lease. You guys have got to find a new place. And they were super disappointed. They wanted to stay, but yeah, it wasn't just what you see right here. This is what they left after they moved out. But there were some other major issues that I will show you here in just a second. For one, they had bed bugs. So we didn't know they had bed bugs when they moved out, but I think our furnace guy or one of the guys said they found them. So we had to treat the house for bed bugs, which involved tarping it and superheating it to like 250 degrees or something. And the company that does that, guarantees all the bed bugs will be gone, because you do not want those guys sticking around. And this here right here, just wait a second. This made my skin crawl a little bit when I saw this, and I was not expecting that at all. I didn't know this was going to happen, but right here I opened the closet door to look at the water heater, and boom, cockroaches crawling all over the door. So I'm watching that again, made my skin crawl some more. I'm just like, ugh. But so it was good that we did have to get those tenants out, even though they're paying. They weren't taking care of the house. It just would have gone downhill more and more. So we went through, rehabbed the house, did the bug treatments, got all those taken care of, and then we ended up selling it. And I think I used the proceeds from this one to buy the creepy property, the 18,000 square foot creepy property that had the roof cave in and the crazy basement. This is a commercial property I bought a few years ago. Great deal, amazing pricing. We paid $102,000 for it, and we rented it to a traffic control company for like $1,500 a month. And they were two brothers who worked together. We checked their references. I believe we checked their credit. It was okay. Their current landlord said they're awesome, amazing. And we rented to them, and things went fine for a few months. And then after a couple of months, things went downhill very, very, very quickly. So we started getting calls from the neighbors that they were fighting outside and screaming and going crazy all throughout the night. So that wasn't a good sign. Told them they could not do that. And we told the neighbors to call the cops. Hey, if they were fighting and doing stuff, call the cops on them. We can't, arrest them or anything like that. And then a month or two after that, they came to me or Nikki and said, hey, I want my brother off the lease. We're having problems. We're having issues. I know we're both on the lease, but I want him off. I just want it to be me. And we're like, no, we can't do that. You both signed up for the lease. You're both responsible for it. You can't just take one off. If something goes wrong, you're both responsible. And he didn't like that, but, they kept paying for a little bit. And then about a month later, they stopped paying rent. And so we asked him, hey, what's going on? Why aren't you paying rent? And they said, oh, we're having major problems. My brother tried to sleep with my wife, or he said his brother tried to sexually assault his wife, something crazy. And we're like, okay, obviously you guys are having issues. You guys need to figure that out. And I guess that's why he'd want his brother off the lease, because they'd have been having issues domestically. And they pretty much said, we're going to stay, we're going to catch up on rent, but, we can't pay for a little bit. We're like, no, you guys need to pay or leave. Those are your two choices. You can't just stay here and, not pay rent. And so I don't think we had to actually file an eviction, but a couple of weeks later we came back, told them again, hey, you guys had to go, or pay rent. And they left. They left us a bunch of cones, which we still have. I believe there were some syringes in the building. They had kind of trashed it, but it was just a big concrete wall open space, so it was pretty hard to trash it very much. So we did a real quick rehab, got it rented again for $1,500 a month, and it's been rented for the last 2 years now to the same people who've been great, who have a welding shop there. So those guys were interesting, the two brothers, and made me realize, hey, it's not the city or state that does the traffic control. Sometimes it's private companies like these guys. Here we have my worst trashed one by tenants. So I haven't really been doing these in any order. And these aren't technically like my worst tenants, but my worst trash house from Tenants. And this is rental property. I think it's number 8, if I remember correctly. You could see a cat just there running through the garage. I've talked about this before. We don't take animals. We don't take them to the shelter, because a lot of times the shelter will just kill them if they can't find a home. So if they're cats especially, we often just let them roam, because they can usually survive on their own pretty good, more than, say, if they're taken to a shelter. So we leave the animals, unless Nikki takes them. Nikki's taken a few too and nursed them back to health. But this house we rented to people who had rented from us before in another property and been decent tenants. So they lived in another property. There's a sister and her other sister lived together. They both kind of had families, but they lived in that house for years and years and years. And they said, we want to move out. We want our own place. So we rented this place to them. And in less than a year, they completely trashed it. Like, it's kind of hard to see how trashed it is right here, but like that carpet is just, it's like it's covered in motor oil. It's just disgusting. They broke windows. They put holes in walls, left all kinds of junk. And they basically just stopped paying for months. Wouldn't respond to emails, wouldn't respond to calls, wouldn't respond to us knocking on the door. So we started the eviction for them. And I think as soon as we posted the eviction notice, they left. So we didn't have to go through the full eviction, but we still had to start the eviction, and they just destroyed this house. And I don't know what happened. I don't know if it's drugs or something else or what it was, but they paid on time. They took decent care of the other property, and they moved here, and everything just fell apart. And the other sister still lives in that other property we have. They've been there like 9 years, something crazy, for a really long time. Always paid rent and had no issues. But this one was just nasty. I don't think pictures do it justice for just how much trash and damage they did to this one. And again, this is one I rented, and this taught me a lesson too, that even if someone rents for you for years and years and years, especially if they move into a different house or different property, it doesn't hurt to recheck their background, their credit, their job history. Maybe something changed. Maybe something in their life is drastically different. And so if you have the same tenant for years and years and years, obviously you want to check the house and make sure it's okay. But it doesn't hurt if you renew their lease to say, hey, I'm going to check credit again. I'm going to check your job history again to make sure you don't run into issues where they destroy a house, because people's lives change, things change. You can see the broken window there. And we don't always know that, unless we're obviously friends or family. And if they're renting your house, you'd really like to know if they have major life changes. Here is one unit of a fourplex I own. So it had 3 residential units and 1 commercial unit. I think I bought it for $192,000 in 2018. A super amazing deal. I think it's worth probably $450,000 now or more. But we had rented to a young couple on this one. And again, I think this was our fault. We checked their credit. They didn't have a whole lot of credit. I think we had them do a cosigner, and they're just starting out. And you kind of feel somewhat bad for people just starting out, because if you have no credit, you have no living history, it's hard to find references or find a new place to live. So they moved in. For a few months, everything went fine, and then it went downhill very quickly again, like things tend to do. So they did trash the property a little bit. As you can see, there's holes in the walls, some other issues, and we just remodeled this place before they moved in too. So that was a little frustrating. But the worst part was how they got into problems. And what we heard and what the tenants had told us is that the guy, I think they had a small kid too, was in jail for domestic violence. So obviously there are some anger issues here. And he went to jail. He couldn't pay rent. He wanted to stay and keep living there, but she ended up moving out, going somewhere else. So hopefully that situation got much better. But he wanted to keep staying there, and we're like, we're sorry. You're way behind on rent. There's also some other issues here. So we said, you can, be best for everybody if you just left. We fixed it up, rented it to someone else, and he agreed. That's what we did. But you can see they did some damage to the property, and it's not a ton of damage. We can fix the sheetrock and drywall and clean things up. But it was the other situation, obviously, that's more troublesome, the domestic violence part, when you have a kid and different things going on there that was very, disturbing, and you just hate seeing that. And hopefully, he got things worked out and is doing better, but we haven't kept touch or, kept in track on what's going on with them lately. But so it's not just the late rent. It's not just sometimes the damage you can see. Sometimes it's the other issues that your tenants are having that makes it even worse, and you just kind of feel bad for the whole situation. Hopefully, they can get things figured out in the end. Here is another house that we found the tenants for. Apparently, there are more bad tenants we found than I thought. But we've owned rentals for, more than 10 years, had lots and lots of renters, and like I said before, most of them have been good. Most of them have not been horrible renters. So this is a situation where we rented to a lady and I believe a couple of children, and she lived there for a couple of years. Everything seemed to be going okay, and then the bottom fell out of everything. She stopped paying rent, stopped talking to us, stopped communicating, and we did have to do an eviction on the house. And when she left, it was disgusting. And so they had bed bugs as well. And she had told us they had bed bugs, and it is actually the landlord's responsibility to treat bed bugs if you have a tenant who gets bed bugs. Whether it is your fault or whether they bring them in Colorado, you're supposed to pay for and treat bed bugs if your tenant has bed bugs. So we did go in there, treat them as best we could while she's living there. But the bed bug person who went in there said, hey, there's no way I'm going to get rid of these bed bugs because the house is so dirty. The living conditions, aren't that great. I can almost guarantee they're going to come back, or I didn't get them all. It's just not a good situation. So the bed bugs stayed there. She moved out. They're there. And we had to do bed bug treatment again where they superheat the house. And at that point, when she's gone, all her stuff was out. We cleaned everything out. Then the guy's like, yep, I can guarantee the bed bugs are gone. You won't have any more issues. And we ended up selling this house too, just because it was in a town that was kind of far from me, not super far, but maybe 10, 15 minutes away from me. And I really like to keep my rentals super close. And we had not had good luck with the renters before this either, so it's tougher to rent than I thought it would be, kind of far away. So I ended up selling it and buying some other rentals that worked out a little better than this one. So I do sell some of my rentals. And, looking back on it now with the crazy prices we have, like, oh, I should have kept everything. I wish I had all these properties. But, I didn't just take that money and buy fancy cars for the most part, maybe some of it. But, we took that money, bought more rentals in better areas or different areas, better, houses, better buildings. So we did reinvest that money, and I think it worked out in the end having done that. Here is one of the worst ones we've had. Probably might be the worst one. And this one was not a tenant we found. So this is a house we bought from a wholesaler. He said it would be vacant, that the tenants would be gone. However, that did not happen. The tenants moved, but they left their animals there and all their stuff, and we had to do an eviction. The animal control came, like, okay, let's wait a day or two, see if they'll come get their animals. They did come back and get their animals, but their animals basically lived in this house for a month or two with nobody there, just pooping and peeing everywhere on all this stuff. And it was disgusting. And this day, it's hard to see here. It was 102 degrees outside, and that did not help things out either. So this was not a house we made much money on. If anything, we might have lost money. And on top of that, they took the closets out, they moved the walls, they did all kinds of crazy stuff. So we had to come through, move all the stuff out. It took so many dumpsters. It was disgusting. And the worst part of it was it smelled so bad. And not just from the poop and the pee, but because they found an 8-foot-long dead snake still in its container, his cage, whatever, along with a dead rat that was pretty much a skeleton that had been sitting there for who knows how long. And yes, you can see kids' beds and kids' stuff. And after this, Child Protective Services was called. I know they investigated it because they had called us and asked if we knew where these tenants were. And we gave them any contact information we had. And on the last house, too, that had the bed bugs, I believe Child Protective Services was called on that one as well, because either by, I don't know if it's the authorities or even the sister of the tenant who lived there, because the sister had called us trying to figure out if we knew where she lived, too, because she was worried about her kids and said she'd had some other issues. And we said, we're sorry, she's gone. We evicted her. We don't know how to reach her. But she was trying to figure out how to reach her so she could try and, take better care of their kids as well. So we look at these nasty tenant evictions and stuff they leave. And the worst part about it is the kids that get wrapped up in this, unfortunately. So it's, we're not the police. We're not Child Protective Services. We can't, do a lot, but we can try and notify the authorities of what's going on, tell them what we see if we see something bad, and hopefully they will do something about it. Kind of like a hoarder house I saw one time where there were 100 cats and lots of dead cats and nothing was being done, but I was able to send pictures to the authorities. It wasn't a house I owned, and they busted the house, arrested the guy. A lot of the animals were reunited with their owners, so that was pretty cool to see. And that and this and many of these other stories in here will be in my new book, In Depth 2, which some of you might be happy to know I finished the first and second draft of it, so it should be coming out here hopefully soon. Here we are at the compound. So for those of you who have been watching my videos lately, we have the compound and the complex. The complex is one we'll show here for our last video here soon. This was one of the other crazier properties I owned with 3 residential properties, a commercial building, and we were able to do cash for keys for 2 of the houses. We left the commercial tenant there, but this house we had to evict. And all this stuff right here is after the eviction, if you can believe it. So they had stuff everywhere, semis, cars, junk, campers, trailers, everything you could imagine. We went through, evicted the tenants because they didn't pay rent. The city was fining us because they had all this stuff out there and they kept adding more stuff. They said they'd remove it and they added more and more. So during the eviction, because there was so much stuff, we took possession of the house, got all the stuff out of the house. But the sheriff's like, hey, can they leave their stuff outside for a week and then come get it after a week? And I knew the chances of them getting it would be very slim, but I'm like, okay, let's just get possession of the house. That's what's most important. And so this was a week later. We came back to see if all their stuff was gone. And of course it wasn't. All that stuff was still left there. We called the police. The sheriff came, told them, hey, you've got to get rid of your stuff. You've got to take it, or else it is possession of the landlord, of me. We can take their stuff, do whatever we want with it. So I think a day or two later, they'd taken their stuff off. They'd moved it. They literally moved it across the street onto some railroad track property, like 500 feet away, and they left it there for 2 weeks until I think they got kicked off of there. They moved it to another vacant lot for another 3 weeks, and then they disappeared. So those were some interesting people and interesting tenants that we had at that property. Here we are, the last crazy tenant story. I'm sure I've missed some. I probably have some other crazier ones that I forgot, but for right now, this is our number one worst tenant. He lived in that little tiny house right there I just showed. The rest is a 5-unit apartment complex. This house right here, and we got word from our contractor that he left a surprise, the tenant who's being evicted, in the backyard. So I came over to see if what he said was true, and yes, there they are, the tires. We've had a lot of videos on the eviction of these tires and the tenant and everything that's gone on and all the craziness here, and this is kind of the start of the super craziness. I'm like, what are you talking about? They just dropped off 300 tires at their property with that little trailer. And I went over there, and yep, they sure did. There they are. And what's crazy is they added more tires than that. There was many more tires added to that in the next few days. There were probably at least 500 tires. I don't know if that's the same trailer or not. But ironically, the trailer they took some of the tires off with was missing tires as well. Not super safe. But we ended up going through an eviction, evicted the tenant, and yeah, there were way more tires later on. And we moved all of those tires out from back here and moved them into 4 40-yard dumpsters, and we still had tires left over. And the next day after the eviction, he came and picked up one trailer full of tires. The rest of the tires went to a dairy, and they used them to cover their silage. But this was by far the number one craziest tenant, just incredibly annoying situation where he never paid rent for 4 months since we owned the property. We did not pick him. We inherited him. And then during the eviction, he's like, oh, just give me another week. I'll get rid of him. No, you've had weeks to get rid of him. You're not going to do it now. He has to sign a brand new lease the day of the eviction where we just start over from scratch and he start paying rent and just forget about all the thousands of dollars of rent he owed and money we'd be spending on the eviction. Just really insane. And he got evicted because his tire store got evicted. And that's why all these tires came over here. So just crazy. So he's gone now. We're trying to get the rest of the complex here vacant. We're working on that. But this was not the house. The house wasn't the bad situation here. It was the outside of the property and the tires that caused all the craziness. Okay, that's our last video, our last crazy story. We have some other ones that I want to chime in here that got honorable mention, but I won't show the video of. And that's one tenant who I picked, yes, who rented a place for us for a couple of years. And towards the end, he was late on rent every single month, constantly catching up. And ironically, during that time, I think we had 2 or 3 car dealerships call us asking us for a reference for a car loan on brand new vehicles. He wanted to buy a $40,000 SUV, but he couldn't pay rent. And this was, 7 years ago when a $40,000 SUV was a lot more expensive, a lot more money than $40,000 is today. And that just really bugged me. He couldn't pay rent. But not only could he buy a new car, but he would list me, the landlord, as a reference to get that loan. So that was an interesting one. Another interesting one was a foreclosure I listed, and this is not a smart move on my part. Again, trusting my gut and thinking people are good based on talking to them. I rented one of my properties to the people who lost their home to foreclosure. So they paid rent for a while, then they stopped paying rent. Then the guy ended up having all kinds of issues and health issues and didn't pay rent and disappear. It just ended up being very, very crazy. So they didn't trash the house too bad. It was a little bit trashed. They didn't destroy everything, but it just was not smart renting a place to somebody who'd gone through foreclosure. Their credit was horrible, and when I did rent to them, I could see why they went through foreclosures, because they didn't pay their bills and they didn't pay us either. So, all right, that's the video. We're leaving you with some of the older footage of this wonderful unit we are remodeling, and it's almost done now. And of course, check out InvestFourMore.com for much more information on our flips, rentals, being an agent, all that great stuff. Have a free book on there. Have lots of books on Amazon, including hopefully soon my new book on all my crazy stories. And I had to leave out so many other crazy stories that I might have to make a second book too, because really there's a lot of crazy stuff that happens to us for some reason. And of course, we love it when you subscribe, like, or comment on our videos. We have lots more interesting videos coming up on all our flips, all our rentals, real estate advice videos, and stuff like that. All right, thanks for watching, and we'll be back with more videos soon.